So initially when I was editing this, the sync was completely fine and I recorded it in OBS, so I didn't even have to manually align the audio. But as I was editing it, it seemed to have slowly had sync issues, and I don't know after I render it if it's going to stay or not, but if it did, I apologize. But in the words of Sara, I'm dripping and busy or whatever, and I don't have time to re-record it, and I find the gas I had in this was kind of iconic, so I'm going to keep it. But if it bothers you a lot, I don't know, just listen to it like a podcast or something. I apologize in advance. But if it doesn't bother you too much or it ends up being fine, just enjoy the video. See you later.
I will not waddle in this victim mentality for the rest of my life. Because when does it end? At 50? At 65? At 72? At what point do we still blame other people for our unresolved problems when we have resources available? Not talking about the people who are struggling with resources, who would love to do it, who just can't do it. Not talking about severe cases. We're talking about people who live their everyday life, earning thousands and thousands on the internet, and just choose not to because it's easier to keep doing what you're doing and cry victim. Tell me why I am so nervous making this video and why my heart is literally pounding uploading it. But for the first time, I feel like it is a necessary video. I think that I want to respect you enough to know where you stand and who you are watching. And I also want to respect myself enough to understand that this is a big part of me growing up. I am approaching 25, and I think that these are the values and morals that I have thought about.
Hi everyone, it's me again. And Squish Gang is present. And today we're going to talk about one of the most self-imposed culture war-esque, melodramatic, victim complex, poorly logically constructed videos that I have seen in a minute. We are going to be talking about, surprise, surprise, YDHB's Why Left the Left video. Woo! Yay! But first, shilling time. Links to socials, ways to support the channel, including Amazon, Patreon wishlist, all that kind of stuff. Any affiliate links, including makeup I'm wearing or jewelry that I possess, all down below. I would like to thank my patrons, names on screen. And unlike Miss Sara or YDHB or Young Dumb Honey Bun, there will also be sources down below because I actually reference what I have and I read them to you in real time. So we're gonna have to get into this as fast as humanly possible because I want to get this up the same day that I recorded, and I worked all day today, so I don't have a lot of time. We're just gonna freestyle it because I want to go through points of the video and a couple of things that I've noted and all that kind of stuff. Let's get right into the news. All right, this is the video that is there. I have talked about YDHB before. I made a video called The Rhetoric on Young Dumb Honey Bun. This is because she has started going down this alt-right pipeline. Now we're kind of at the precipice of this transition that she's been making to this kind of weird conservative traditional woman-y type deal. I had actually recorded a video the other day about Jeffree Star's Republican era, so that will be the next one that comes out because I want to get this one out first because I got a lot of rage right now. And not because I'm a soft baby poo-poo leftist on the internet, but it's because of somebody who appreciates academics legitimately, which we'll get into a little bit. So we're going to do some credentials first for today, because this is going to become relevant later down the video. Here is a picture of me. There is me holding my university degree. Okay? Now, this is relevant for a reason. Obviously, I blanked out any information that's crucial. I want to say there's something that matters here. Okay? Because Sara's justifying a lot of her bigoted behavior based on her credentials, okay? So she says she graduated honors. Now, when I was lurking the subreddit, the snark subreddit or whatever, they said that all bachelors in the UK are honors unless they don't do the dissertation. Now, I don't know what that means. Apparently, that's just standard. And I want to show you, because I went to school in Canada, that I might know what they're talking about because there is a distinction there. So if you can see, I'm going to turn my light off for a second because it's reflecting off of the light. It says honors, English literature, and rhetoric philosophy minors. So that's the nature of the degree, right? And then underneath in parentheses, that says distinction. Now, that means the honors, I did graduate honors. You can see it's there, but that's the classification of the degree. That's just what I took. I could have had a 55 average, to be honest, and kept that and had it honors written on there like that. Distinction underneath, that's my average classification. That's what bracket I was in. This becomes relevant because in her master's, there is it says pass, which is not good. For those of you who are wondering, this parentheses distinction like that, that means I got between 80 and 85 average. And if you wanted to know, and then Dean's Honors is the next up. I think I ended with an 84.8, which is really disappointing because 85 is like, it's the difference, but that's besides the point. So I just wanted to show you that before we get into the conversation, because I have a feeling that people are going to be like, well, why are you discrediting her educational honors, blah, blah, blah. This is from somebody who also did it. So, and also because people ask me what I study all the time. So I'm going to turn the light back on. And all the stuff that was my full name and degree numbers and things like that. That could like dox me. So, all right. I just wanted to say that because I find when you're fighting somebody like Sara, who takes things to such a superficial light, I kind of have to stoop to her level at the beginning for her to even acknowledge me in any meaningful light. So she starts off by saying that she's nervous in a way that indicates a very strong victim complex. Now, I'm going to add in some clips of her constantly calling Amberlynn Reid the victim and how she victimizes herself in ways that aren't even necessary to establish a bit about Sara's personality.
At what point do we still blame other people for our unresolved problems when we have resources available? Not talking about the people who are struggling with resources, who would love to do it, who just can't do it. Not talking about severe cases. We're talking about people who live their everyday life, earning thousands and thousands on the internet, and just choose not to because it's easier to keep doing what you're doing. And cry victim, cry fat shaming, cry isms and schisms all the time. It's just easy to do that, and it feels nice because then you have someone coddling you all the time, and it's just so nice. And then everyone else who doesn't coddle you is obviously evil. Know what Jade would do, and I don't see anyone forcing you into anything because I know, and we all can see your personality. We see how stubborn and manipulative you are, and I think it's ridiculous to compare what Becky did actually do in real life to what Jade could potentially do in your fantasy. It's ridiculous, and I think it's disrespectful.
So she also said that she's ready for backlash, so that's where I come in because I'm a professional hating ass bitch. So so it's like, because the thing is, like I said, I think if you were to take the structure of this channel and the classic structure of Sara's channel, as in we're talking a year or two ago, they are quite similar. So I find that I want to establish my differences as quickly as possible. So we're gonna do a backlash video because I love being a hater, and I only like being a hater because it's funny to me when people who are haters relentlessly and without true backing can have people come for them. I think it's kind of satisfying. Also, one more thing, this is my graduation ring. Oh, my pudgy little fingers. She says that it's a blessing in a Western country to express yourself freely. Now, she says later that it's because of free speech, but she phrases it in a way in conjunction with the previous statement that's kind of like, because Western people are so woke that it's annoying to her that people have any backlash to her. And we'll get into how she conflates backlash to a couple of other things.
To right now of how I grew up very left-leaning, not understanding anything about politics and not particularly being involved in politics at all, to now at 25 still not being involved in politics, still not associating myself with one particular group. However, I have made the decision to present as far away from the left as almost humanly possible because I cannot anymore take the insanity and the contradiction and the wokeness anymore.
That she says she grew up separate from politics, then continues to say that she cannot handle the insanity of the left but then says that she grew up separate from politics, but then later says that her parents would tell her about how bad communism was in Poland. So if you have anti-capitalist notions told to you as a child, then you are not separate from politics. I feel like that's a pretty simple thing to realize.
Yeah, and she was basically proposing, like, why wouldn't you want to live in a capitalist like society? Like, why wouldn't you want to, have everyone be equal? And I remember thinking that is so crazy. I remember thinking, how could you ever hear about this and even consider it? Because coming from someone whose mum still remembers what communism was like in Poland, to coming to someone who has never experienced it and has just learned about.
Like, I love when people contradict themselves really deeply within the same 40 minutes. Like, we haven't even gone like 2 different videos. We are actually arguably probably within the same 30 minutes or so, because the 2 front ends are pretty heavily loaded with a bunch of bullshit. Then continues to say that she cannot handle the insanity of the left. I love for her to describe people who criticize her online as insane as somebody who's supposed to be a therapist, because I'm sure she's bitched at Amber for doing that, for saying people are insane. I know she's definitely said that about Amberlynn saying people are psychotic, but now she can do it because it serves her. Trey iconic. In honor of that comically ignorant mind frame, poorly stated statement with no backing, I'm going to do a tiny little, just kind of fun, little montage of hilarious right-wing moments on the internet because I want to. So enjoy that little B-roll right now.
America badly needs more neurotic candy. Then late last year, Mars went further. The company added obese and distinctly frumpy lesbian M&Ms to promote, quote, feminism and body positivity. In other words, explained the Mars Corporation, it's good to be fat. Have some more M&Ms.
And in one video entitled, "Nobody Likes Me, I'm Done," he is seen sobbing while shaving his hair off into a plate of eggs. I mean, this is happening. This is what is allowed on YouTube when you weigh it against people that are taken off for wrongthink, for not towing the line, for questioning the election results, right?
So I don't see how the LGBT alliance is going to hold up under that sort of reality. So, yeah, that's for sure, man.
What a crazy
and
situation.
Let's add something equally ugly to it, since we haven't gone far enough yet. So here, we'll do a little bit of arithmetic. So.
No, I get you're explaining that, like you said, you love the Zionists. You don't agree with some of the things they're doing, even though you don't support a lot of what's happening. Seriously, I've really studied a lot of history. Plus, I had family that was there. And so, I mean, I don't think Hitler was a good guy. I get the Hugo Boss uniforms, amazing. But I mean, just because you're in love with the design, you're a designer. Can we just kind of say, like, you like the uniforms, but that's about it?
There's a lot of things that I love about Hitler. A lot of things.
The reason that white people are inferior is because they don't have enough melanin in their skin.
So essentially her credentials for being smarter than us that are on the left is because of her ignorance of politics. Yeah, we're following that mind frame. Now and she said that because her family encouraged her to read, that she actually has common sense on this. Now I'm going to pull some books within literal arm's reach of politics that I've read. So first we have this one, which we're going to reference a lot later because a lot of the notions that she states are actually white supremacist statements or align with white supremacism. And this book's written by a black woman. So we're going to read the words verbatim of a black woman because she also misconstrues the study later in the video by paraphrasing it to fit her narrative. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read from this verbatim to give you the actual narrative from the author's mouth. So this is a politics book to some extent, or a social statement book, whatever, how fascism works. We've got Veils of Distortion. So this is about news, the misinformation age, death of expertise. I've read these. Re-enchanting the World, Feminism and Politics of the Commons, Contemporary Readings of Rhetoric, or Readings of Contemporary Rhetoric, Landmark Essays of Contemporary Rhetoric, Rhetoric of Motives. And then we have this one, which is about the paradigms of education, teaching literature to adolescents. Okay? Which talks about kind of ways of learning, social dynamics, and concepts of understanding these types of things. So this is my reading list. Also, besides the like individual essays I've read that I have referenced, notes I've used, and things like that. So her credentials for understanding things are that she has been encouraged to read and was ignorant of politics. Now, I want to say reading Gordon Jeterson's 12 Rules for Life doesn't necessarily make you, as she states, inquisitive person. I think this, yeah, I was listening to this on 2 times speed. So mind you, maybe I'm a little bit of a silly goose. She then talks about the sociology class as if it is heaven on earth. And because people were able to talk about whatever they wanted and state their political opinions and things like that. To this, I'm going to bring in something else because right now I am in college I'm in my master's degree. Like she has flaunts her master's later in it for education. Okay. So I'm in for English literature, teaching and things like that. But that also, when you're doing your master's, a lot of it's about teaching pedagogy and things like that. Because what happens for me when you do your master's separate from your undergrad specialization, what's happening is you don't have to do the courses for English as much as you do general pedagogy. So how do I prove that? I don't think I have to. I've done it before. Yeah, I have a student card and everything. It's just, I just don't want to get up. I just don't want to get up. I'm going to be honest. So point is, I'm doing that. And in Quebec, one of the professional competencies is to be a cultural facilitator. I'm actually going to pull it up right now. Competency 1, acts as a cultural facilitator when carrying out duties. Okay. So you can see there that you have competency 1, then you have competency 6, manages how the class operates, and competency 8, supports students' love of learning. Okay. That mastered stuff is just where you should be once your internships are done, but that's neither here nor there. That, if the UK follows a similar structure for that, and given the history of Canadian education, they're like this normally, like pretty much we're just like UK light for a lot of things. That means that it's the teacher's job to allow those conversations to be facilitated in the first place. It's not that they're trying to create this ecosystem of the, what is the word the conservatives use? Something of marketplace of ideas. Yes, the marketplace of ideas. That it's marketplace of idea, and it's a conservative idea or ideology. But, you know, again, so I'm just saying, I've just proved, see, here's the thing, here's the difference between myself and Sara in this video, right? Everything, it's why this is already going to be so long. Everything I'm saying, I'm proving directly with something. You see, my table's shaking because of how many books there are, okay? So I'm proving everything in real time because I don't want there to be even any wiggle room about what I'm saying being bullshit, because she pulls so much out of her ass in this video that it drives me nuts. I listened to this on the bus on the way back from my internship today. And then I was like, no Friday plans today. We are making a video, because I'm just like, girl, I can't believe this. Her sociology class that she's yakking off is like not even, if it follows any sort of similar teaching pedagogy to Canada's, which I have a teacher in my master's program that did his education in the UK and taught in the UK and did his teacher college in the UK. And he talks about how it's similar very often. So I think I can state that. So then she talks about communism and says, and this is where I went absolutely bonkers bananas. How could a neurosurgeon and a mechanic make the same?
It couldn't fit into my brain that someone just suggested that a neurosurgeon and a cleaner, or a neurosurgeon and a mechanic, could be paid the same and be compensated the same for their jobs. That was so completely different. It was so insane to me. I have never met anyone from my country, or even I have Ukrainian friends, can say that the parents or the family or anyone remembers communism in a favorable light.
And talks about communism in Poland and whatever. Despite the fact that a lot of leftists online who identify as communists are not identifying with the Russian or Polish communist ideologies as they were practiced, or the Chinese one, which are often, you know, don't align with the original writings. They're talking about Marxism or Lenin, you know, Marxists and Leninists or whatever. Leninists. I have a stutter, okay? And I'm angry. That's not the same thing. But she's conflating them to fit her narrative, because that way she can pull the card of, I'm Polish, I'll speak on this. despite the fact that she has not experienced that communism and contradicts herself in being not involved in politics in the same statement. Now, she talks about this concept of how can a neurosurgeon and a mechanic make the same. Now, she makes money on YouTube. Now, I also make money on YouTube being a hating ass bitch. This is not an important job. I'm sorry to say that to some of you, but in comparison to something like a teacher or like a doctor or a lawyer or a mechanic or a restaurant server or someone who cooks in a hospital, I want to say that, and I hate to be this person because I hate talking about money on platforms like this, I make more money than some of the staff at a school. People who work in schools, if they're resource or they're tutors or they can't get tenured contract or whatever, on good months, I make more money than them. Doing this, I put in more effort than a lot of people on the platform do, and a lot of people on the platform put in way more effort than me. I'm not saying I'm the be-all end-all of anything. This is not an important job, but under Sarah's argument, she's saying that because I generate more income than, let's say, a resource teacher or a behavior tech that deals with disabled children, that's because my job is more important and should be thus proportionally profited in that way. I'm trying to do this in the sense of like how that doesn't make any sense. And because her entire video is based on confusing anecdotes, I am trying to build off of her arguments with my own anecdotes. So I'm trying to say is Amberlynn Reid hater videos are not higher value. And she even says this in some of her videos that it's mind-blowing that Amberlynn Reid like makes more money than some doctors. How does that make sense? And to contrast her communism argument, communism has in places like Russia and stuff, I am not saying has not made people suffer. That is not what I'm saying. However, are you thus saying that capitalism works? Because if we talk about things like the indigenous populations of Canada, there are communities that have been wiped out because of capitalist endeavors. So is that because they're of low value? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, there's no logical support to her arguments. I'm not arguing for or against anything right now. I'm just trying to build the blocks of how this is working. I could have completely misunderstood. I probably did to some extent, but it doesn't matter because the construct of how she's laid this out is so incredibly confusing in and of itself. And I'm supporting myself by putting the clips of her video throughout this as well. Then she subtly states that she graduates psych with honors. This is despite allegedly lying about getting accepted into med school. I just showed my degree earlier in the video and I talked about that whole process. It's right there. It's real. Like I said, grad ring. Oops. Degree. Over there. Okay. You can't be in grad school without this. She then talks about how some of the things she had been taught in her undergrad and stuff would be considered bigoted now. And then how that's like disgusting that these practices can't be accepted anymore. That's normal in medicine to have things be changed and could be like, oopsie poopsies, we goofed. Like how the guy who invented lobotomies won a Nobel Prize. And I understand that the examples are extreme. However, at the time, they weren't considered extreme. You understand what I'm getting at? So right now, we might see like, oh, this is like kind of weird and kind of inflammatory. And then down the line, we might see damages of some of these practices that Sara was referring to and then be like, oh shit, it was a really good fact that we put a stop to them. Okay? And I'm not saying that will or will not happen. But what I'm saying is you can understand historically by reflecting on how certain practices have been rejected that might be an idea. For those of you who are into philosophy of science, for example, this concept of logical positivism, which means if measure good, if can't measure bad, to simplify it to its lowest extent, that is something that has been formally rejected over time for understanding things like quantum mechanics, for example. So I'm just trying to apply this to another field. Okay. And it's something that I'm more versed in than psychology. And this also just shows how fragile she is and how chronically online she is. Because this whole video of why she's leaving the left are made out of things that didn't happen. Because again, go watch my Rhetoric and YDHB video if you don't believe me. I take some of her sources and search them in real time and show how faulty they are. And how, like, she's a victim. She is so pressed about anybody pushing back against her and her arguably bigoted opinions a lot of the time that she calls it shunning. You are shunned by everybody if you have a difference in opinion. If you can truly back yourself up, be respectful, understand the opposition, and be constructive, you're not being shunned. It's because you take any judgment of your process or intellectual reflections on certain things and your opinions as people attacking you personally that you're considering it shunning. That's your problem. People disagree with me in my comments all of the time. Whatever. As long as they don't call me like a cow or you know, they don't insult me as in like literally calling me names, I will entertain it. And there are times where I disagree with them still, and I'll say like, yeah, it's not really my vibe, whatever. But I'm not saying that they're shunning me, because they're not. And that's fine. Right? But I'm still going to have my own backbone. I talked about this in, I think, the last video on this channel right now, where I said, like, I don't really like a lot of like deep leftist online discourse. I talked about that in my shoe on head video, I think, or my role model video. Or that doesn't mean that I'm going to let people who misconstrue my views tell me that I don't have them and then actually take that to heart. I know what I believe in, and I'm not going to let people online change that, because that's the difference between myself and you, Sarah, despite the fact that, and I'm going to pull a you for a second, I couldn't imagine, I'm 22, by the way, I couldn't imagine being almost 25 and crying to my ever-decreasing audience that people online don't like when I say things, when I reference things from poorly referenced media as these clickbait titles to try to congregate some sort of alt-right audience. When people disagree with me, I don't call it shunning. And I can't imagine making a 45-minute video crying about it. Couldn't be me. I think I'm more mature than that. Because you do that to Amberlynn Reed all the time. You go, how are you 32? And blah, 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 playing with Legos, whatever. I would much rather somebody who's harmless and playing with Legos existing on the internet. I'm not saying Amberlynn Reed's harmless. I'm saying on this argument that she's specifically reflecting on, then have someone's hobby be spreading messages of that lead to alt-right pipelines, and has been proven to time and time again. Basic internet psychology discourse, things like that. Then she describes that she was once a man-hating feminist and said all men are bad, and then goes into this tangent about how she's never been oppressed, and in reality she's very privileged.
Things. And if you go back, if you know me, a lot of people that do know me I am very embarrassed for. Because I was a man-hating feminist. And I am so embarrassed about it, but at the same time, I think it's time that I take ownership of it and say, you know what, yeah, and I've grown from that, and I'm stepping into adulthood with new ideas. I was the first one to be like, men like have oppressed women for so long, and that everything that's wrong with the world, and white cis het men are just like the spawn of Satan. Like, it's so embarrassing. I look back now at a college argument that I had with someone talking about the pay gap, talking about the gender pay gap, and this dude was like, listen to yourself. And he was talking to me, he was citing evidence, and I was so determined to just not listen to any of it, to be like, no, I don't care, this is what happens, this is what it is, having no idea, no evidence, nothing to back it up with. But I was convinced that I was right, and I was convinced that he was wrong. And I cringe, because it got to a point when no one else had to tell me that, but I had to stand there and say, okay, you say things like, you hate all men. Do you hate your father? No, God no, he's the most hardworking, loving man I've ever known. Do you hate your brothers? Do you hate your fiance? Do you hate your male friends? Well, no. So how can you say that? And I know that this is maybe like a little example, but it starts at the roots. How can you say that? How can you say such a generalized thing? Are you oppressed right now? Well, it depends what you mean. Well, have you ever felt oppressed? Well, no. Have you ever been denied opportunities because you're a woman? No. Have you ever been denied opportunities because you are an immigrant and a woman? Well, no.
So she's hating on leftists because when she held leftist beliefs, she did not have the capacity to argue coherently. So now because she couldn't actually back herself up, she is therefore disregarding the whole side and picking some that have way simpler, less nuanced points because that's what she can grasp. Again, because I will defend myself all of the time. That's why I literally read from the books in real time. because I can prove my statements with citation in real time. She used to do that too, and then she disregarded it so she could just make these weird inflated rant videos instead, because it's less effort. But then she's been getting less reward for that, thank God.
Because it's just putting people at risk. And there has been, surprise, surprise, studies on the effect of restrictive dieting and binge eating. Herman and Peter in 1985, the association between binge eating and restrictive eating presents sequence data indicating that dieting usually precedes binges chronologically, which means it happens before a binge, and authors propose that the dieting makes the dieter vulnerable to disinhibition and consequent overeating. In other words, if you are used to eating a certain amount of calories, like her, for example, 4,000 to 6,000, then you do a diet that focuses on 800 to 1,000 calories, do you think your body is going to take well to that? If you do it one day you're eating 6,000, the next you're eating 800, because I think your body will be like, what the fuck is going on? And then you will crave more and you will be triggered more, or it's at least likely to happen. It's crazy that there's this widely available information that you should have probably seen if you did hours and hours of research like you claim to have done.
So maybe that's completely wrong and villainous of me. Maybe I'm a terrible person for that, but I just don't want to hear about white dudes, black dudes, stereotypes, this and that. Like, I don't care. I just want to, why was that necessary? Why is it, normally it's white men being handed even more power because, white men have the most power in our society because of the patriarchy. What is that? I don't care. I just want to watch Scooby-Doo. Like, I just want to watch something to get myself out of that real world. Like, it's so weird to me. Why are we so obsessed with putting that kind of thing into everything nowadays? It's so like we can't have any break from it now. We have to leave like everything that was nice and kind of comforting. You're not allowed that anymore. Like, we have to live, breathe, and sleep social justice and activism.
Then she misreads a study talking about this scar on the face, and someone actually put the study on the subreddit, which I can pull up right now. Actually, I think I screenshotted it. So she was saying that people, if they are told they're oppressed, will be oppressed. That they have a victim complex of themselves, despite this whole video quite literally being her own victim complex of people disagreeing with her online. So it says the following: should be kept in mind that the paradigm used in the first study is one in which persons are led to believe that they are temporarily deviant, and only in the eyes of another person they leap from the results. Therefore, its conclusion that the support of Wright's 1960 assertion that physically handicapped persons are often prone to articulate their social reality entirely in terms of their handicapped, even when the objective facts do not support such a construct, is tenuous at best. It is entirely plausible that with some history of interaction with others, a physically deviant individual develops a strategy for testing and evaluating whether specific behavior or social outcome can correctly attributed to a physical failing. So what they're saying is that it's not that they are victimizing themselves, rather they understand cues of somebody's judgments. So they could have been judging them on something else, but then they've picked up on it because of these cues of their mistreatment throughout their life. That's not the same. That's like the way that like people of color will pick up on microaggressions faster than white people. It's not because they're victims. It's because they've seen it so many times that they actually understand where these two things are coming from. But you wouldn't understand for someone who's not oppressed. But you are oppressed when you want to talk about how you were an immigrant with no language and had to work so much harder than everybody else to get where you are. Because you would have to work harder because of oppression. So which one is it? Do you understand? Like, it's not making sense. I'm getting heated, bro. I'm getting thirsty. So here's my favorite line. Actually, no, not yet. We're not there yet. So then she says men run society because her dad works and men fight in wars. And she can understand that large-scale issues exist with oppression of women, but then herself doesn't experience it, so I guess they don't really exist.
I don't hate men. I don't feel oppressed. And that's not to say I've never been a victim of crimes committed, especially by men, and I think a lot of you, especially women, will know exactly, unfortunately, what I'm talking about. That's not to say that, because I have. And as unfortunate as it is, that doesn't mean that all men are terrible. That means that that one man was terrible. And to think about the things I was saying, that the menace of society, who keeps it running? My dad gets up at 4 a.m. to go to work, even though he has been retired for years and he doesn't need to work. But he wants to, because he finds a passion in his work and he thinks he's, giving something back to the world. by doing that and fixing things and, you know, helping his family. He feels useful. He keeps the world running, and so do a lot of men. What about the men that are fighting in wars and things like that? Do you hate them too? And I was so embarrassed, because it's like, how can you say stuff like that when you can't actually defend it?
So here's my favorite part. By favorite, I mean the part that made me just absolutely oh God, why are you like this? She goes on a rant about how people victimize themselves, like I just talked about the scar thing, right? Then she says that she would hate to tell her white daughter about how people are mad at her for things that she's not responsible for that happened hundreds of years ago. So this is talking about, like, this is referring to, like, racism. Like, if people called her white daughter, like, a white supremacist, let's say, or you're upholding white supremacy.
Terrible advice, and I could never imagine looking at my daughter telling her men are your enemy, whites. I could never imagine giving her a phone where someone on the internet is going to tell her that, and they are going to tell her that. I can never imagine saying to my daughter, because you are a woman who is white, you are in some way guilty of something that has happened hundreds of years ago on a different continent to you. You are the issue. I could never imagine them saying that to my daughter, to someone on the phone. I think that is insane. And I can never imagine talking to someone else's child, saying, because your skin color is different to mine, you are forever going to be the victim. You'll never achieve the same as my daughter whose skin color is white. That is so evil. How can you say that? How can you then go on and say that you want to fix things by telling people that they are victim?
So that's what this entire book is about. And I would recommend this if you're a white person who's not like Sara and just goes, the fact that I would have to unpack my white supremacy is too much of an inconvenience for me, so I'm not going to do it. This is a workbook for whiteys. Okay? Like, for you to understand how many aspects of white supremacy are built throughout our society, okay? So in this book, the author, Layla, is it Saeed, I think is how you say that? Or talks about and defines white supremacy, okay? I'm working through this right now because it's actually a workbook, like it takes 30 days. And I'm about 10 days into it, I believe, as far as the workbook part. I've been reading through because the journal entries I don't always have like time to do. Sara would be the type that would consider that she isn't a white supremacist because she's not like a Nazi, right? So let's read a little bit. People often think that white supremacy is a term that is only used to describe far-right extremists and neo-Nazis. However, this idea that white supremacy only applies to the so-called bad ones is both incorrect and dangerous, because it reinforces the idea that white supremacy is an ideology that is only upheld by a fringe group of white people. White supremacy is far from fringe. In white-centered societies and communities, it is the dominant paradigm that forms the foundation from which norms, rules, and laws are created. Many white people hear the words white supremacy and think that doesn't apply to me, that they don't hold the belief, but rather that they believe all of us are equal and they don't modify their treatment of people based on the color of their skin. What this book, which is a deep diving self-reflection tool, will help you to realize, however, is that it isn't true. White supremacy is an ideology, a paradigm, an institutional system, and a worldview that has been born to the virtue of your white privilege. I am not talking about the physical color of your skin being inherently bad or something to feel shame about. I'm talking about the historic and modern legislating, social conditioning, and systemic institutionalization of the construct of whiteness as inherently superior to people of other races. Yes, outwardly racist systems of oppression like chattel slavery, apartheid, and racial discrimination in employment have been made illegal, but the subtle and overt discrimination, marginalization, abuse, and killing of BIPOC in white-dominated communities even today, because of white supremacy, continues to be the dominant paradigm under which white supremacies operate. So we must call a thing a thing. We must look directly at the ways in which the racist ideology of white supremacy, this idea that white equals better, superior, more worthy, more credible, more deserving, and more valuable, actively harms anyone who does not own white privilege. If you're willing and dare to look into white supremacy right in the eye and see yourself back, you are going to become better equipped to dismantle it within yourself and within your communities. White supremacy is a system you've been born into, whether or not you know it. It is a system that has granted you unearned privileges, protection, and power. It is also a system that has been designed to keep you asleep and unaware of what having the privilege, protection, and power has meant for people who do not look like you. What you receive for your whiteness comes at a steep cost for those who are not white. This may sicken you and cause you to feel guilt, anger, and frustration. But you cannot change your white skin color to stop receiving these privileges. Just like BIPOC cannot change their skin color to stop receiving racism. But you can do is wake up to what is really going on. And then she invites you to challenge your complicity, right? But she will not challenge it. Instead, she would rather say, I am not one of the bad ones. Despite the fact that what she's upholding aligns a little bit more with being one of the bad ones. The other thing is when she talks about not having experienced any sort of oppression in any way is she is conventionally attractive on top of everything else. And she's wealthy enough to pay for a lot of body modifications to further align herself with the beauty standards, to further uphold her own privileges. So like it doesn't make any sense. But then wants to align herself with these more centrists or conservatives that I'm sure wouldn't like a tattooed tooth diamond therapist. Do you know what I mean? Like, again, against her own interest, really, in this way. And then she says a typical, right-wing lie that children who just express opinions of the opposite gender are forced into transitions. And then, but goes into but what about detransitioners, Tucker Carlson, Fox News, Ollie London type beat, and then refers to any pushback as shunning, as I had already mentioned. Then she talks about being pro-choice and how some people are too pro-choice, and says that people don't understand the negative effects of abortion. Here's another thing that has nuance that she refuses to unpack. The reason that you feel so awful about abortions is because of conservative society telling you that it's evil. Because, and this was shown in, I have another book called The Colonial Problem that talks about Indigenous society. Here, the thing is, I did not think I was going to pull this up. So I guess you could believe me or not, but Indigenous people had systems of abortion. And it wasn't built into this shame because they weren't seeing it as evil. So I couldn't find it in the book because I remember that fact as I was talking, but I did find a CBC article that details that this was in fact the case. And I will post the article in the description as well. But there's a screenshot there, and just above it as well, there is an excerpt that says, but abortion in fact is a long history on Turtle Island, the name that some Indigenous people used for North America. Prior to colonization, Indigenous women from many cultures used medicinal plants to regulate their birth rates. So that is, in fact, showing that there wasn't really an issue before. And they don't even want to call it abortion because that is a term associated with the evils of a conservative society and a colonial society that decided that it was a bad thing to do. So just, again, Sara being wrong about things or having no nuance about everything because it's just easier to chat shit than to think critically. And the second you're challenged to just be like, oh, well, I don't have anything off the top of my head, so I must have just been wrong the whole time. Anyways, that's all. And then talks about how, some people are too pro-choice because of this one random TikTok. That's the other thing. She's taking her entire opinion of the left based on people who are chronically online, as opposed to actual political ideology and actual theory. Despite the fact that what she's giving she's granting the grace to conservatism is apparently some sort of theory. Doesn't really make sense. Then she goes into the basic comments of women can't be traditional anymore. I talked about this when regarding feminism with Shoe on Head. Feminism is not that you cannot be a wife. It is if you just want to be a wife, unpack why that is. And if you can unpack it and it's still for you and you're not seeing what issue might be coming up with that, then go ahead. They just want you to challenge the basic forms here, right? Then says that she is mad, I like edgy comedians like Ricky Gervais. So again, you can see how selfish this frustration really is. It's that people just bitched at her on the internet, and then she's like, oh, I'm gonna hate the left for 45 minutes. Then there are similarities to 1984 because of people apparently editing Roald Dahl's I don't know how to pronounce his name. I just read it and in my head it just blanks. The Charlie and the Chocolate Factory book or whatever. And then says there are similarities to 1984. This is such a hogwash conservative take to the point that is it Hassan? Somebody makes a joke that goes that will just mispronounce George Orwell and then put 1980 in the wrong year. Like, Jeffrey Orwin's 1987. It's like a joke like that. It's literally become a joke in the left community because of how often they will try to reference that book incorrectly. I've actually read it. She talks about leftists wanting to change history, despite the fact that right-wing people in like Florida, for example, have been trying to pass laws that prevent the teaching of Black history. It's not the law to read the original versus the new version of Charlie and the fucking Chocolate Factory, dumbass. But they do make it the law that they cannot talk about these things in school, the history stuff and things like that. So again, you're ignoring the other end for your prerogative, like to benefit you, because everything has to be to benefit you. You can never actually take anything, but then you're the first one to say like, oh, everyone's a victim. Except for you, this is a 45-minute victim piece. Then she says people make their whole life about what they're sleeping with. Classic homophobic argument. I'm not against it. Just don't put it in my face. I'm just leaving it at that because I don't even have to unpack that because it's just stupid. And then people can't go about their lives. But then she makes a 45-minute complaining victimization piece where she misconstrues the left to a couple of chronically online people as opposed to actually taking anything logically and learning any theory about anything. So that's actually where I'm going to leave it because now my video is almost as long as hers. I'll see how it edits down, I guess. But yeah, thank you for watching. This is where we're going to conclude the video. Links, sources, Amazon, Patreon, ways to support the channel, including any affiliate links, what's on my face, any of that. Thank you to my patrons again. Woo. Squish Gang says goodbye. And I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you when I see you. Bye.
40, red 40. Red 40 right here, Gatorade 0, Gatorade 0. Okay, this also regular Gatorade, red 40. We're gonna...
Well, you can't handle some artificial coloring? Pussy! I fucking love Red 40! I love it! Me one day without Red 40.